So really, really excited to once again welcome back Peter Merholz. Peter is an extremely well-known design and product leader, has been in digital design and product for the last 25 years, notably for building the premier UX consulting firm called Adaptive Path. And also, Peter is the co-author of Org Design for Design Orgs, one of the most well-known books focused on organizational, managerial, and operational challenges of building in-house design teams. So let's have a big round of applause for Peter Merholz. Yeah.
Thank you, Preet. Let's see. Okay. At some point, you'll release sharing, and I will be able to share my screen. Hi, everybody. Talking to you from Oakland, California, where I am about to share my talk. The atomic unit of design is the team. Before I dive in, as is usual for me, my talk is probably longer than the time I have allotted, so I'll be talking quickly. And as such, I wanted to make sure you all had access to the deck. So if you go to https://tinyearl.com/atomic-design-team, you can grab your own version of the PDF. You're welcome to do that and follow along. You're welcome to do that and just refer to it later. But I wanted to make sure that you actually had this material because, as I said, I'm going to talk fast and there might be things you want to get back to. Again, that's tinyearl.com/atomic-design-team. All right. So, hi, I'm Peter Merholz, and yes, my talk is called The Atomic Unit of Design is the Team. You can reach me at any of these various modes of communication, either email, my Twitter handle at PeterMe, or the website Org Design for Design Orgs, which is the website for the book that I co-wrote with Kristen Skinner, available at Amazon everywhere. So, the Atomic Unit of Design is the team. What do I mean about that? Let's go back to 2012. I had recently left Adaptive Path, which Preet just mentioned. I was one of the founders of, and I was a principal in. And I had gone in-house. And going in-house, I needed to learn how to organize design within an in-house context. And in 2012, the prevailing mindset of how to organize for product development is shown on these two images here. You either have this idea of the two pizza team on the left, that's the Amazon model, or the Spotify squads and tribes model, right? But regardless, either way is a matter of these small cross-functional teams were the engines of product delivery. And so that's what I found myself walking into when I joined. And so, what you would have is something that might look like this. If you're looking at your three in the box, you have design, product, and engineering. And here we've got a generic e-commerce website. At the far left, there's leadership, design lead, a director of product management, and director of engineering, and then a set of squads or two pizza teams for the different features of a website. Search and browse, product page, reviews, personalization, checkout, right? So this was the standard way of approaching it, and there were many good reasons for this as the way that things were working, right? When you have one team like this, you have a lot of advantages, and advantages in particular for designers. The designers are, as part of a team, they're not part of a make it pretty shared service. They're not part of some internal consulting team that gets farmed out just for a couple of weeks and then pulled back. Those designers are dedicated members of the team. They're engaged throughout a product lifecycle. And because of that, designers end up having this real sense of ownership over the work alongside their product owners and the engineers that they're working with. And then because the designer is there as part of the team, when you launch something, you can quickly iterate on it, right? In the prior model, in a different model where you might be in this kind of internal services mode, the designer's there for a couple of weeks and then leaves. And then after launch, it might take a long time before you can get the designer back. So in this model, you get the designer there, quicker iterations post-launch. However, what ends up happening are a set of issues arise over time when you have designers embedded in product teams. Designers end up finding themselves working on one narrow problem for a long period of time. The designers get lonely. They're the only person, the only designer on the team. Everyone else is an engineer or the product manager, and oftentimes product managers have engineering backgrounds. So the designer might feel isolated. It's not clear how to grow. Where do you go from here? How do you evolve in your career? What I saw, particularly when I first started working in this way, was that these designers would often be more junior, and they would be peered with people who are more senior in their career. So I would have designers with 2, 3, 4 years experience essentially peered with product managers with 10 to 15 years experience. And so you had this kind of imbalance in how things worked. You would get a siloed user experience, right? Each team is solving a problem in isolation of one another. And so the way the user experience operated wouldn't necessarily flow from team to team. And you would have this less efficient use of time and people, by which I mean, there are times when in the life cycle of product development, you need a lot of design and the designer would get overwhelmed. But then there's times when you don't need as much design, when it's more about QA or it's more about production or more about other things. And then the designer's just hanging out, trying to figure out what to do. And so trying to strike that balance becomes this challenge. And so what I ended up, then there's this other thing too. So the designer on that team, right? When you only have one designer, you're now asking them to do a whole lot of stuff, right? You need all of these skills to be brought to bear in order for the design to work well. And you're now asking a designer to be a visual designer, interaction designer, conduct user research, understand systems and structures, be a leader enough that they can engage with peers appropriately, have good communication skills. That's a ton to ask, right? And so, this model of building teams, this 2-pizza team model or Spotify squad model is really optimized for engineering and speed, for product development, for throughput. And what I would argue or ask is, what if we were to optimize for something else? What if we were to optimize for user experience? What does that end up looking like? We mentioned adaptive path. And what I found as a design executive since I left consulting and came in-house is that much of my career has been trying to figure out how to bring what worked in that consulting context where your primary goal, your primary objective is the delivery of quality user experiences. How do you bring what works in that context or what works in that environment into a corporate context? And these corporate contexts, which they don't exist to deliver great design, right? They exist to deliver some type of business value, and design is a means to that. And the solution isn't internal agency, right? That we know that doesn't work. But I find that the pure embedded model has its challenges as well. And one of the key things that, if you've ever worked in a design firm, one of the things that's true is that design always happens in teams. At Adaptive Path, this is a small design team of 3, Christian Polino, Alexa Andrzejewski, and Aman Sabet working on a project. The point is just to show the team, right? You don't have a designer working in isolation. The 3 of them work together in this space, share with one another, help one another in order to drive a project forward. So if in orgs that are optimized for design quality, design happens in teams, how do we apply that internally? And my suggestion is relatively straightforward. You take those designers, you pull them out of those embedded contexts, and you turn them into a team. And there's a lot that's going on in this slide that I won't be able to dig into, but bear with me for a moment. But the idea is you have this team, in this case of 6 folks, who are now designers working across this set of features and functionality instead of embedded in those teams. And as I was doing research for this talk, I came across this article written by a director of design, Nicole Burrows. And she reflects on a similar experience to what I am talking about. When she joined this company, she saw that designers, this was how people were sitting. And the designer was kind of on their own in the sea of engineers. And one of the key differences, one of the key changes she made is she just had the designers within these different teams sit close to each other. So they were still essentially part of those other teams, but the designers were sitting together to kind of form another type of team, right? And because she saw that they preferred that, they were able to learn from one another, help one another. The punchline to this story is that she works at Spotify, right? And so you have someone, a design director at the company that is held up as this archetype of squads, autonomous squads. There's plenty that's been written about how they've actually moved beyond the squads and tribes model because it didn't actually work, particularly as they were growing. And in this case, this design director realizing designers work better when they can work as a design team. I'm not going to read everything that is on this slide, but I will hit some highlights. This is one of the reasons I wanted to make sure you had a copy of the deck so you could refer to it later, right? There are a ton of benefits for working in teams. Designers don't get overwhelmed because they're not the only one trying to do everything, right? You have a team now working to deliver, and some team members are better at certain things than others. Designers don't get stuck working on the same thing forever. We recognize that designers have different strengths and weaknesses. By working on a team across a contiguous set of features, we are able to deliver a coherent end-to-end experience, a holistic view. One of my favorite things here is the load balancing, right? As I mentioned, sometimes during the cycle, a sprint-based cycle of typical product development, sometimes you need a lot of design and sometimes you actually don't need that much design. When you work as a team, you can now move, in particular, I'll go back here, you can move the designers that are towards the top, they can kind of float to wherever they're needed in those product teams based on actual activity. And you don't just have people sitting around on teams when they're not needed because for whatever reason, design just isn't as active as at that time. By working as a team, the designers don't get lonely, right? They're working with other designers and thus it's easier to support them in their career. So I hope I've made a case for why you should be working in teams. So now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to think intelligently about constructing teams. This is something that so for the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been an independent consultant working with design organizations. And what I probably help them with more than anything else is helping them think about how to establish their organization and their teams in a smart and intentional fashion. So that's what I want to share some highlights of that with you. The thing to remember about a team is that it's not just a group of people. Simply having designers who used to be embedded now thrown together doesn't really make it a team. It just makes it a collection of designers. What defines a team is its purpose. So when you have a design team, you need to make clear, why does it exist? So that's the first step. And so, for example, this is a very light purpose, but this could have been the purpose of the overall. So when I worked at Groupon, right? Groupon was known for its kind of off-kilter personality when it came to the shopping experience. So you could imagine if I had the shopping design team, right? Their mission statement could have been to deliver a little joy in someone's day through an unparalleled e-commerce experience suffused with our off-kilter personality, right? Some type of mission statement, something that galvanizes this group and makes it clear why they exist. That's where you start. You need to have the purpose in place. Once you have the purpose in place, you now need to be intentional about how you're designing the team, how you're shaping the team. And because I love alliteration, we're going to continue to lean into the letter P. And we're going to talk about people, so who is on the team, practices, how do things get done, and their potential. What defines success for the team? You need to have each of these things made explicit. Too often teams handle this in an implicit or unintentional way, and it shows. You just spend a little bit of time up front making these elements explicit and your team will perform that much better. So people. A design team should have no more than 7 people. It should usually be around 4 to 7 people. If you get beyond 7, your team is too big and you should split it up into a couple of teams. It gets too big because you get these coordination challenges, communication challenges. There's actually a bunch of science on optimal team size, and 6 or 7 is about the sweet spot. You want to have this team have a strong design leader. We're going to talk about leadership in some depth in a little bit later. And then you want to make sure you have a spread of skills and a range of experience, scope, and backgrounds, right? You don't want it to be cookie cutter. You don't want everyone to be exactly the same. There's too many skills to be brought to bear. If you remember the wheel, you got visual design, interaction design, strategy, planning, user research. You can't expect any individual to do all these well. And you don't want to have 7 people who each are really strong at interaction design and visual design, but aren't good at anything else. And so something that I would encourage you to do is map the skills of the people in your organization, right? And so here what we have are 6 people across 9 skills. You can imagine they're the 9 that are shown here: strategy, planning, etc. And each of them is graded on a 1 to 5 scale in terms of kind of level of competency. 1 would be not very good at it, 5 would be expert at it, right? And so you map each of them, and don't worry about the specifics, that's not the point, but you map each of them to get a sense of like where their strengths are. You have some folks who maybe this S here on the upper right, this person's probably more senior because they have more strengths across the board. These Ds are probably more junior because they're pretty good at some things, but they're weaker at others. Here's a content strategist, so you can imagine this longer one is content and writing, but maybe these weaker ones are some of the design ones. The point is, assess their skill sets, and then what you can do is figure out how they form as a team, right? And in this case, this ends up making a fairly good skill team that has a decent breadth of skills. They have up to 5 in everything except for a couple here. Oh no, they actually have 5 here. This is the only one they don't have any 5s on. And they're able to deliver at high quality across the range of skills, even though no one of them is good at everything, right? And so you want to kind of identify that chemistry, where you can bring people together and through their complementary nature, deliver on a set of skills. As I mentioned, that 4 to 7 people. So what happens if you have more than 7 people, right? So the point isn't to create a single super giant team. The point is to create a team of teams. So let's say your shopper experience, your buyer experience is now expanding across a whole bunch of these product groups. You might have 3 design teams. It might take 3 design teams in order to deliver end to end, right? You've got about 20 people here. But you break them up into groups of 5 or 6, and then you give each of them a job along that customer journey. So that's what I mean by team of teams. We have now 3 teams of 5 or 6 working in a coordinated fashion to deliver on this overarching experience. So that's people. The next thing you want to think about is practice. And I'm going to talk about 2 different things about practice. One, you need to identify your process. This is the revamped double diamond. I've actually used the double diamond a lot in my work. I've grown to, I don't think you should consider the double diamond a strict process. I actually show this example as something not to do because it's too rigid. You start at the left and then you just move inexorably to the right. It's trying too hard to engineer the process into the double diamond. I would encourage you, if you're looking for a good process model, Christina Woodkey's messy process model based on an extension of the design thinking process is an excellent one, and that's the URL that is on this slide. But regardless, you need to figure out how you do your work. And one way that designers do their work is through their process, through the methods. What are the steps that they take? What are the methodological tools you use? So you want to make that clear. But it's not just about process. We tend to think as designers that as long as we have our process defined, we're done. You also want to, every team needs to adopt a set of rituals and norms. And we kind of know this from, agile development, Scrum development. You have your ceremonies and other types of rituals. That's true of design teams as well, right? And so when you create your design team, when you establish it, you want to go through a set of processes that really help bring these people together. These folks may never have worked before together. Something that we did, we actually talk about it in the book at Adaptive Path, because we would sometimes, we would often be working with people we hadn't worked together before, and this is me and my co-author, Kristen, we would identify what the roles we wanted each other to play, separate from just being a designer on the team. So here, my team has asked me to be positive, a good listener, strategic, and transparent. And we've asked Kristen to be an advocate, to be organized, to be a delegator, to be a good listener, right? So you set up this set of expectations on what we want from one another as a team member, again, not just as a designer. Then as you do the work, as the team is in flight, you've got your ceremonies, you've got your process and methodologies, but there's also norms that you're going to want to consider. And I'm showing a couple here from two different contexts. The one on the left comes from a project that Google did called Project Aristotle, and that's the URL on the lower left, where they identified the 5 qualities of the most high-functioning teams at Google. And this is where the concept of psychological safety really took off, at least within kind of our community, was through the work that Google had done, right? So you want to have a set of norms for how you behave. And then on the right, that comes from Kim Malone-Scott's Radical Candor, right? Those prescribe a set of norms for how you kind of communicate with one another, right? So what are the ways that you do your work, and how do you engage with one another day in and day out? Again, not just around the design work, but around communication. So you want to make that clear. And then things come to an end. You're going to disband this team. And this is an example from LinkedIn. We often tend to think of disbanding a team or someone leaving as something to avoid, something to be sad about. LinkedIn actually celebrates when people move on from the company with this thing called next play, hashtag next play. If you go to LinkedIn and you do a search on hashtag next play, you'll see a lot of posts from people who had been working at LinkedIn as they move on to the next company, right? So think about in your team, how can you celebrate someone's departure? How do you make it okay that they are moving on? And how do you not only make it okay, how do you make it great that they are moving on, that they are tackling new challenges? So you want to be conscious as a team, not just how you do the design work, but how you treat one another as people and as colleagues. And then the last thing I want to share is measures of success. This is the potential, right? Every team needs to know how they know they're going to be successful. And there's 2 ways that I think this primarily works. One is, how are you delivering value to the business? So those are those elements on the left-hand side. They come from a talk by Satyam Katamneni. The URL is there. These 5 factors are pretty much cover most of the value that we are deriving in terms of what design does in the world, right? We help adoption, retention, satisfaction, engagement, and efficiency, right? These are kind of those core product metrics that we help, that we contribute to as designers. On the right-hand side, there's a set of qualities, though, that we want to measure around, like the health of the team, the functional health of the team, right? If you're in a product design team, how healthy is that product design team? And there's a few things that you can measure there. Are we happy with the quality of output? Do we have a high bar of output, and are we delivering on that? Is the employee experience good? And one way you can measure that is, are we retaining employees? Are we doing, maybe we're doing an internal survey, and what is morale? What is employee satisfaction, right? So there's ways to measure employee experience. And then another degree of functional health is effectiveness, velocity. Are we delivering as would be expected, right? And there's this is all, there's a balance to be struck here. There's an alchemy, right? Quality and effectiveness are often at odds with one another. And so you have to figure out how to manage that so that you're not producing a lot of mediocre stuff fast, but nor are you producing only the highest quality of stuff, but you never actually ship anything, right? So for every team, they need to figure out for themselves, what are their measures of success? So every team needs to figure out these 4 Ps: their purpose, why do we exist, the people, who is on the team, the practice, how do we do our work, and the potential, what does success look like, right? And then you take those, and I'm going to turn them into this little kind of pill. And the reason I'm doing that is, let's say you get a much larger organization, right? I showed an organization that had some scale, this buyer experience design team. But let's say you also have your seller experience design team, right? Because you're in a marketplace. Well, and then you need a leadership team, right? They're a team of design leaders, maybe a head of design, and a couple of those people, the 2 of the people who are leading the 2 design teams are also leaders. Maybe you've also got a head of research and a head of design operations on that team. Speaking of research, oh, hey, We have a UX research team. We actually have a special functional team of UX researchers. So they're a team as well. So teams are not fixed, right? Just because you're a member of one team doesn't mean you're not a member of other teams. In this case, you have some people are a member of two teams, right? The user researchers are a member of the team they support plus the UX research team. That UX research lead is a member of the UX research team and the design leadership team. So that's okay that people are members of a couple of teams. My point around that little pill of the people, purpose, practice, and potential, you need to identify that at literally every level. So if it's a small product team, you need to figure that out. And you need to figure it out for the whole, in this case, like this buyer experience design team. And then you need to do it for everything within the seller experience design team. And then you need to do it for the design leadership team, needs to understand why they exist, how they know they're successful, what their norms are. And then for any team like this UX research team, or you could imagine a design systems team or a content strategy team. What is their purpose? Well, who are their people? What is their potential, and how do they do their work? So at every level, we're being explicit about the definition of the team. So I have one more thing that I'm going to be talking about, which is the most important role on your team, and that's the role of the team lead. And I'm going to share a few reasons why this role is so important. So it's even more important. I'm going to build this one out because I don't think I share this, right? If you look at a team like this, if you look at a team like this, you would often think the most important role on the team is those leadership team, the leadership, right? The folks in orange, and that the VP of design is the most important role on the team. I would argue that the most important role on the team is actually within those smaller boxes with the 5 and 6 people, the team leads in those boxes. So let me now get to that. So why is that role so important? So that role is important for a few reasons. That role is uniquely responsible for translating that big picture view that the leadership team has into delivery, right? They need to be able to span this conceptual level of strategy to surface in a way that no one else on their team is expected to, right? Everyone else on the team usually has their own band within there. The team lead needs to be able to span a much broader range without getting lost, without getting the bends. Similarly, and for anyone who's familiar with the talk I gave at the Design Leadership Summit, you'll recognize that. This was actually a DesignX talk, and you can see the video for this in the DesignX. There's a video of the talk I gave there. If you're interested in this model, you can dig into it in more detail. But this, the team lead has to manage in these 3 different ways. The team lead has to manage down and get the most out of their team as this coach. They have to manage across and be this diplomat working with peers, product managers, engineers, marketing, and sales, and help those folks better understand the value that this person's team is delivering. And then they have to manage up. They have to manage executives. They have to manage stakeholders, right? And so this person, this team lead, is kind of uniquely situated with all these relationships revolving around them. And because of that, they have this, they wield this significant influence. And a strong team lead is able to really amplify their team's abilities and push their team's what their team is doing throughout the organization. A weak team lead, what ends up happening is this all kind of collapses in on itself, and they can actually drag down a lot of the people that, not just their own team, but a lot of the people that they're interacting with, if they are not able to measure up to what is needed of them. So team leadership is this particularly crucial role. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to team leadership is that, when I mentioned this buyer experience, and you have this experience that might be crossing not just multiple product teams, we have 10 or so product teams, but multiple design teams now. The team leads are the ones who end up, through their working together, making sure that that experience is coherent. You don't need the 20 people here to make sure the experience is coherent. Those 3 team leads are the anchor that make sure that that buyer experience holds together from end to end. And so my parting thought is, with an intentional team guided by strong team leadership, design not only can deliver its best work, it ends up becoming this force to be reckoned with throughout your organization. And with that, I thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter. Your talks are, I love that they feel more like a workshop. It's like everyone's involved and their brain is like fitting the pieces of everything you're talking about, especially the 4 or the 5 P's, the 4P pill.
4 Ps, yes.
Practice
That's
and
new. That
intentional.
I've
Yeah.
invented. I made that up for this talk.
No, that was really amazing. Thank you so much. Like again,
Sure, my
we
pleasure.
we can't thank you enough for sharing such amazing learnings
My
with our entire community.
My pleasure. And feel free to hit me up, anyone on Twitter, send me an email, or I'm on the conference Slack if we don't really have time, I'm guessing, for Q&A. So
Yes.
ask away through those digital means, and I'm happy to engage.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter.
Okay,
Thank
take
you.
care, everybody.
Bye.